Today, we are going to be talking about public land bow hunting and scouting with somebody I consider truly incredible. His name is Sean McVeigh. His channel is Sean's Outdoor Adventures. And this guy has an uncanny ability of picking out a spot on public land with a topo map and maybe some aerial photos, maybe walking in the dark, setting it up, and then seeing a deer walk by. I don't know how he does it. He's some sort of deer whisperer guy, but we're going to pick his brain today and see what his best tips, his top 3 tips of public land bow hunting and scouting. Let's get started. Hey, Joe McLean here from CatholicHack.com, where I live my life for God, and I'm passionate about traditional archery. And I'm super pumped today to be interviewing Sean McVeigh from Sean's Outdoor Adventures. This is a guy that I really got into when I first decided that I was going to go hunting. When this traditional archery thing had to lead to something, and for me that was hunting. I was going to train, I was going to work really hard, I was going to hone the skill of putting the arrow where I needed it to be so that I could one day ethically take a game animal and then feed that animal to my family. That was my goal. So I had to figure out, I didn't grow up hunting, unfortunately, so I had to figure out how to hunt, right? So of course you do what everybody does when you have to learn something. You YouTube it. That's what I did. So I YouTubed it, found Sean McVeigh, and he has this whole incredible channel and has been doing this literally for decades now, sharing his experiences, his best tips and tricks on public land hunting. And this is a guy who hunts on some very high-pressured public land. And, you know, that's not easy, and that's very in line with what I'm experiencing down here in Texas. So we're going to be talking all about that. But I want to invite you, if you're new here, if you've never been to my channel before, well, let me invite you to become a member of our community. Every single week, I'm putting out a video on traditional archery, tricks, how-tos, you know, like I said, trick shots, reviews, and I would love for you to subscribe. So click that subscribe button and possibly even that bell notification icon so that you can be alerted to the very next piece of content that comes out. Again, every Thursday at about 8 o'clock or so, I'm putting out a piece of content, and I would love for you to be a part of this community. All right, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Sean McVeigh. Sean, thanks for being on with us.
Thanks, Joe. No problem. Thanks for letting me come talk to your people.
Sean, you know, I really do respect you quite a bit, not only for your hunting capabilities, the skills, the value that you've provided to me and countless thousands of others around the United States and beyond, but, you know, you're a man of faith and Catholic Christian, and I'm really grateful for your time tonight, so thank you for being with us. But
yeah, definitely the Holy Spirit was at work today. I mean, I had a long drive. You and I talked a little bit. I had a 2-hour drive, and I just stopped. I was getting an oil change, so I wasn't doing anything. And then you texted me seeing if I was available tonight. So, I mean, it was just like the timing was perfect. So, definitely, I think the Holy Spirit was doing a little something there.
Amen. You know, this is a time where a lot of trad hunters or even regular bow hunters are out there taking some turkeys. And, you know, I had an opportunity to go turkey hunting like 2 weeks, like last weekend, but I was traveling and I had to say no, which is like, it's like slow death.
Yeah.
To say, like
Yeah.
somebody with private land said, come hunt turkey or pigs on my land. And I'm like, no, I had to like be out of town. I had to travel. So I was like, oh, this is horrible. I mean, I never get this chance.
That happened. I said a piece of you dies when that happens.
That's exactly right. So, but this is also a time when a lot of guys are really starting to up their scouting game and sort of, you know, getting psyched up to make their way through the long, hot summer in preparation for the fall. So I thought this would be a good time to get you on and really pick your brain about public land bow hunting and scouting and all that. But before we get into that, let's how did you get started in hunting?
My dad he didn't grow up hunting. He was like you. His friends kind of got him into it when he was, you know, in his early 20s. And then so when my parents had us, my dad put a bow in my hand. I was 4 years old, you know, and I started shooting at the age of 4. And the first year I was legally able to get a hunting license, you know, we went through the training, you know, that you have to go to, and then got my license, and I was in the woods hunting with my dad with the bow. Yeah.
Amazing.
So
Now,
I think
always
I was 12 or 13 years old. I forget what the age was. It was either 12 or 13 back then.
always compound?
Well, no, my first probably 8 years was recurve. Like from the age of 4 up to about 12, it was 100% recurve. And then when it was time to hunt, my dad put a compound in my hand, and so I started to learn how to shoot that. So yeah, my whole beginning was recurve, and I've always shot recurve, but it does take a tremendous amount. In my mind, it takes a tremendous amount of work and practice to really stay good at it and be good at it. And I don't always have the time I feel I need to be. You mentioned, we were talking earlier about being ethical, and I just feel like for me right now, with the amount of time that's available to me, it's more ethical for me to use the compound with sights. But I did hunt a whole year. It was a compound, but I hunted instinctively, and I shot 7 deer that year, but I also missed a couple, and the last one that I shot, I hit it in the guts, and boy, that really, really bothered me bad. I ended up finding the deer by the grace of God, but I went home from that hunt, and I just laid in bed. I just felt so bad. I was like, I think I'm going to quit hunting. That's how bad I felt. And what I learned, and this is something for traditional archers they might relate to, or something to keep in mind, I had practiced so much throughout the summer to prepare for that hunting season, but as the hunting season rolled on, I wasn't practicing because I was in the tree stand. And by the end of the season, I had, you really have to keep up on your whole shot process, and some of it had slipped from me a little bit, and that's why I ended up hitting that deer a little far back. And so, that's an important thing, especially for traditional archery. You got to keep that, try to get a few arrows in the target every day. That would be my advice, because throughout the season, like maybe before you go out on a hunt, just take 10 minutes, set your target up, and shoot, and see where you're at, because that was, and a hunter who has been there, who has had a not so favorable shot on an animal, they can relate, like, yes, that hurts, and you definitely don't want to be in that situation, and you want to be ethical to the animal. So anyway, all that being said, I don't have the time right now that I feel I need to really, because I don't know, if you watch my videos, if I draw back on a deer, it's a dead deer. That deer is not going to go, that thing's dead in like 30 yards, and it's because I'm very particular about my equipment and being on point, and because when I do draw that bow back, I want to know that this deer is not going to go far. If it gets out of my sight, it won't be far out of my sight. Yeah. And I don't have that same level of confidence right now with like my traditional equipment. So I do still shoot, but it's not my preferred hunting weapon right now for those reasons.
Now you have a couple of books, but one of your books is really about your journey as a hunter. What's the title of that book? Becoming a World-Class Hunter, Bow Hunter's Spiritual Journey. I had a different subtitle initially, but in order to communicate that there is a sort of a spiritual component, like my relationship with God, I renamed the subtitle. So it's currently the subtitle is a Bow Hunter Spiritual Journey, and it does take the reader all the way through my early years, but then also like as I got older, like in my 20s or so, that's when God kind of said, hey, you need to straighten out a little bit. And so I tried to straighten out, and I began to find that one of the best ways for me to develop my relationship with him was actually through hunting. Because the neat thing about hunting, Joe, and you can relate to this, is there's a set of rules. Right. And so like there's an end of shooting light each day, or beginning of shooting light, and there were times where it's past the end of shooting light, and I would have an opportunity at an animal, and now it's like I'm experiencing all these reasons going through my head as to why I should shoot this deer or whatever, and really that's an example of a temptation. But I wouldn't have recognized it that way, because it did, it's just all this positive stuff, like you could do this, you could feed your family, whatever. And it's like, well, hey, that's not the right thing. And then I began to say, okay,
let me look at that, and then let me look for that when it happens in my normal life. And so what my point is, I really felt like through hunting, God was helping me become a better person in general. And so that's sort of like, that's something in the background of that book, and why I kind of, adjusted this title of it.
I love it that for those same reasons, it drives me in many ways, forces me to work hard, and frankly, I see, if the animal's going to give up its life, that animal deserves my very best to hone my skills, to do all the necessary preparation in order for that sacrifice of that animal to not go wasted or to not be taken lightly, and that's why I prefer to butcher the animal myself, as part of that process. I'm not making judgments on people who pay butchers. I'm just saying that's my part of my journey. It's a very spiritual thing. I've got a video on that on my channel too, but I want to welcome, El Matias. I don't even know if I'm saying that correctly into the chat box, but hey, brother, thanks for being here and hanging out with us. He asked where to buy your book. It's Sean'sOutdoorAdventures.com. I put a link to the store for your book in the chat box, so thanks for hanging out with us and being a part of our live stream tonight. We're talking about public land, bow hunting, and scouting. We're talking about hunting in general with a bow hunter, Sean McVeigh from Sean's Outdoor Adventures. And, Sean's got an incredible wealth of experience, a couple of decades now, at least. How many, 20-some years now, Sean?
It's probably, let's see, 30 years.
Has it been 30 years? Hey, man, hats off to you. That's awesome.
I'm in my 40s, man.
You're an old man. Oh, wow. So, no, seriously, though, you've got an incredible gift of not only sharing your information, but really just, I think you have so much to offer the rest of our community, and I'm glad you're here with us tonight, and we're going to pick your brains a little bit about some best practices. Top 3 tips is what I'm naming this for public land, bow hunting, and scouting. And this is one of the things that really attracted me to your channel, and you've got a lot of content on your channel, Sean's Outdoor Adventures. I'm going to post a link to that as well. It's actually in the description of this live feed. You can just look down in the description. You'll see a link to his channel there. But tips, reviews, actual hunts. You've got like a reality TV show that you call the Map Reading Challenge, which is fantastic. I would love to do that with you someday if I can ever get over to Maryland.
Actually, I have a guy driving up from Texas this year.
Amazing.
You guys could have carpooled if I would have thought about it, but I don't know.
Oh, wouldn't that have been fun? If I could have only gotten the time off, that would have been awesome. So, all right, so let's dive into some of the nitty-gritty of public land. I mean, I'm looking at the wall behind you, and you've got some great racks up. Look at all this. That's incredible. But that was a lot of hard work and time put into that. But I picked up I've got your books. I picked up your how to read topo maps and all that stuff. And this is really, and I'm not tooting your horn. I'm not just blowing this up. But you really do have a gift for picking out spots based on topo maps, going there and seeing deer. That just blows me away. I try this same technique. I go out of the woods. I don't see anything. If I see a squirrel, I'm feeling pretty good about it. I'm giving myself a high five because I saw a squirrel. I mean, the only thing I see is where deer have been. So if you want to know where deer have been, I'm your guy. I can tell you where deer has been, but I can't tell you where a deer's gonna be. That's my problem.
All right. Well, here is tip number 1. And of course, you have all spring and summer to be out kind of doing a little walking around. But the biggest thing, Joe, is to hunt the habitat. And what I mean is hunt for the right habitat. Hunt for the right habitat. And so what is the right habitat? What I'm looking for, especially on public land, is I'm looking for an isolated area. Like if I'm trying to harvest a decent buck, I mean that's obviously a step up from just getting a deer. If I'm trying to get a decent buck, I need an isolated pocket. And Joe, an isolated pocket doesn't need to be far from the parking area. It just needs to be a pocket where people don't think to walk through, okay? And so I'm looking for an isolated pocket, but I'm also looking for that pocket to be real thick. So thick that I can't see in it, and if I was to walk 10 yards in and turn around, I can't see out of it, okay? And the reason for that is if you're hunting for a good buck, he needs to have a place where he can hide from a hunter. So the first thing is I'm hunting for habitat, and a lot of people are hunting for deer sign. Okay, forget the deer sign and hunt for the habitat. I will drive public land, and if I'm looking into the woods and I see nothing but hundreds of yards of space, I'm going to keep driving. I'm not going to bother with that. Especially you as a traditional hunter, you need to be at most 20 yards from your target. I mean, some guys might feel comfortable shooting farther, but for me, even with my compound, I don't want to be more than 20 yards away because I want the deer to be dead, you know. And so your goal is to get to within 20 yards of where that deer is going to be when you're going to be there. And the first way to do that, especially as a traditional equipment user, is to find a place where they are feeling safe and comfortable. And out in the wide open is not that place, okay? So, first thing is first, find that isolated area. And again, it doesn't have to be 2 miles deep in the woods. I mean, let's see, this rack right here, this is an 8-pointer rack. That was 1.5 miles back in the woods. It was far, but it was an isolated spot. And it was also a previous clear cut, so you couldn't hardly walk through it. And this is tip number 2, especially during hunting season. In hunting season, you have the pre-rut, and the rut is for archers in most cases. I don't know. I've never hunted in Texas, so I don't know how it falls within the hunting season. But in most of the other states I hunt, in the East and the Midwest, hunting season encompasses the pre-rut and the rut. I mean, for archery. So now, when you have a thick area, which is something I'm already looking for because that's going to hold my big guy, you want to focus on the edge of that, because cover changes is where the bucks do the majority of their rutting activity, whether it's making rubs, making scrapes. Most people think I'm going to walk the edge of a field and find scrapes and rubs, and that's because it's a cover change, but they don't translate it as that. This is a cover change, which means this is where the bucks are going to be cruising and laying down their sign. So, Joe, if you're a 1/2 mile back in the woods and you come upon a distinct cover change from like somewhat open woods to real dense, that's time to slow down and start focusing, okay? And now, for you as a traditional archer, and we can kind of incorporate number 3 here, is you need to find the spot where you're going to get a shot, okay? And anytime an animal is going through a cover change or a topographic change, it's going to stop and survey. So this is what puts you at a disadvantage, Joe. So if you're in a more kind of open side of that thicket and the buck's coming out, he's going to stop while he's still standing in the thicket. And he's going to look around, and if he spots you or if he wins you, you're all done. And so the key for you is to find a vantage point that's going to be slightly behind where the deer is going to stop. So let me draw this out a little second here for you. And I'm going to transition to another situation aside from a cover change where a deer is going to stop. If there is just a 1 or 2 foot dip in the ground and a deer's trail goes through it, it's going to stop before going through that dip. If there is a log in the deer's path and the log is a 1 or 2 foot in diameter, in most situations it's going to stop before jumping over that log. And this is where a lot of young hunters really mess up, especially hunting on the ground, is you need to really identify what direction is the deer going to be moving the time of day I'm going to be here. Okay, so if you've been able to identify a thick bedding area and what you perceive to be a feeding area, okay, so the deer is going to be traveling this direction and the log's here, you don't want to be on the side of the log closer to the food source, because what's going to happen is the deer is going to stop when it gets to that log and look around, maybe wind or spot you. Now, if you put yourself on the side that the deer is coming from and you let the deer go past you, he's going to stop and look around. And now is when you have a quartering away shot. The quartering away shot is the best shot, because you can get your arrow up in those vitals. And another thing I would do for you is, now let's say there's that blown down log and there's different trees. And now I want to be in a position where I am being masked by a tree here, but I want another tree out in front of me that's going to cover his head when he stops. So he's not going to see me when I draw. And even if he's past you, he's going to have less likelihood of spotting you because you're a little bit behind him. But when he stops at that log, his body will be exposed. So you know what I mean? So think about your placement, okay? I want to place myself where I'm going to have the best shot at this deer, and I'm going to, really get, because if the deer's quartering towards you, that is not a favorable shot, especially traditional archery. So, Joe, this tip is when you're scouting and you look for especially for you and hunting on the ground, look for those spots where the deer's going to stop. Find those travel corridors and just walk them and look for something. And there's a video I have called, I think I called it Redirecting Deer. I have a playlist on my channel called How to Hunt Whitetail Deer. And if you look through that playlist, there's one called Redirecting Deer. And what I did is I laid a whole pile of sticks right in the middle of the deer trail. So the deer was going to either have to stop to step over it or stop to walk around it. And the deer did exactly that. It walked up, and it actually got a little nervous because I did it a week before hunting there, and it was like, whoa, this wasn't here before, and it just kind of stopped and was looking, and I drilled the deer. You know what I mean? I was up in a tree stand. But my point for you, Joe, is if you have a hunting spot that you're like, oh, this right here is the best spot, but there's nothing going to stop the deer, you can make a little barrier. You can find some blown down sticks and make a little pile like a foot high that covers the trail. The deer can step over that pile easily, but you're going to cause that deer to just pause for a second. And when that deer pauses, you got a nice standing still shot with your traditional equipment. And if you put yourself in the right area, you're going to have that angled up into the vitals, and that's really just going to give you the advantage in that situation. And that's really what you need. You need to give yourself an advantage over the deer. Now, let me say one other thing about this. Especially because you were saying about hunting on the ground. Obviously, the wind's going to be a challenge. But one of the neat things about this kind of a spot is if the wind is changing on you, and if you're able to really survey, and you're like, okay, I don't see any deer right now, not even close, you might be able to get up and tiptoe to the other side of that main trail that the deer is going to cross, and get on the other side if the wind's going the other way now, and you're still in the right vantage point, but now you're also playing the wind. And obviously some of the keys, if you're going to get into maybe trying that, is you want to jump over the deer trail so that you're not leaving your scent on the trail, because they'll stop and smell that. But I've successfully jumped over deer trails many times, and they walked right past my spot. They didn't pick up on it. But you also want to practice, and this is something to practice during the summer, is practice walking as quietly as you can. Because when you get up and move, you want to be quiet. And here's a little thing I don't normally tell people, but I have actually at times intentionally tried to sound like a deer walking rather than be quiet. What I would do is I would put my toes down and then slam my heel down. So it's
I've done that. I have done that too.
The deer gait. So if you're going to get up and move like that, you can even do that. If a deer's in the distance and it hears that normal gait of an animal, it might not really pay too much attention. If you can really work on that, especially in the summertime. And I did that one time. I actually trotted like a deer. I think it's actually in my book, that we talked about. It was during the rut, and I was in a ground blind situation, and it was kind of getting dark, so I was like, and I had messed up. I had called in a giant buck, but I just didn't get a shot, and it kind of walked off. And I thought the hunt was over, so I hopped out of my ground blind, and I made the sound of a trot with my feet, and I trotted about 20 yards and just stopped when I got into these bushes, and just to see if I hear anything. And sure enough, this giant buck came storming into the clearing where I was at, because he thought it was a deer running, and he wanted to see what was going on. It's the rut, and is that a buck chasing a doe? What's going on? And so my point is, there are times where if you can mimic the sound of a deer trotting or walking, you can actually, that actually can help you.
Yeah.
I've experienced that. So.
If you're hanging out with us right now and we're talking about hunting on public land, bow hunting on public land and scouting, Sean McVeigh is my guest today, and you can see behind him he's got some incredible experience to share with us. Almost 30 plus years now of hunting on mostly public land, high pressure public land too. And so we're picking his brain tonight about scouting and getting ready and getting psyched up for, the bigger game come the fall. But I know there's some guys out there that are chasing turkeys right now. But if you're hanging out with us tonight on the live feed, I would love to hear from you. Why don't you throw into the chat box, right? Where do you hunt? Do you hunt at all? Yes or no? What do you shoot? Are you a trad shooter? Do you shoot a compound? What's your rig? What's your setup? Leave that in the chat. We'd love to see what you're shooting and where you're hunting. If you're hunting at all, we'd love to have you a part of our conversation tonight. But Sean, you're sitting there talking about so much, and I'm thinking about my own hunting situation. I hunt on public land here in Texas, and I hunt mostly in the Sam Houston National Park, which is about 45 minutes north of me. It is very thick, piney woods, and it's so tough because, where do they feed? Well, everywhere. I mean, there's no ag fields anywhere near that. So it's tough because you're trying to look for a water hole maybe. And when it rains, they all have water holes all throughout the woods, so they can go anywhere in their bedding area and never have to leave. But, one time I was thinking, I think it was last year, I decided I wanted to go to a whole new spot. I had been hunting sort of the same 5 spots forever, and so I need something new. So I stopped in to like the park ranger office, and I'm like, you guys got to give me the goods. You got to tell me the information. Where are all the deer? I'm looking for a nice new honey hole. And this guy pulls out a map and he says, I would go there if I were hunting. This is where I would go. And he points on the map. I'm like, great, I'm in. So I go home. I pull out the topos. I tried, I looked at the topography. I looked for funnels. I looked for I saw a creek. And I thought, I bet they're moving along this creek. It's a very natural, it's sort of a feature, right? So I said, I'm going to go there. And I get up crack of dawn, 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm driving an hour north to get there. And right before I turn off onto the dirt road, I see an 8-pointer, on the side of the road, he's scraping a licking branch off the road. And I thought, this is a great sign. I'm going to see big deer today. I can't wait. Pull off into the dirt road, drive up about a half mile, and then everybody and their 4 sisters have pickup trucks, in the woods, hiking into the woods. I'm like, I thought the guy said this was a honey hole. Like, everybody's here. I've seen less cars in a Walmart parking lot. I mean, it was bad. So then I'm like, I'm trying to make the best of it. So I find a place to park. I get ready. I'm walking in the dark. And I'm trying to scout as I go. What I like to do if I've never been someplace is I will walk really slow towards my ultimate destination and just try to see what I see, even if it's in the dark. And I'll try to be really quiet when I'm doing it. And so, long story short, I walk through a mile of soggy, wet, nasty mud water. My feet are soaked. I finally get to the spot about, let's say, 7 o'clock in the morning. It was already starting to get light. It was pretty light out. And I wanted to go, there was like a real thick bedding area there. And this is what you said about pay attention to transitions. Like, I could see that this was a transition. And I even thought to myself, I wonder if I should keep going. Because where I wanted to end up was past that, along the trail. Right. And I said, well, I got to get to where I want to go. So I kept going, and I'm like making noise. It's loud. The trail is not much of a trail anymore. And when you know it, 20 yards from me, I heard the deer get up and snort at me, and grunt at me. And I'm like, you're kidding. I couldn't see it. I mean, it's so thick, I couldn't see anything. I could only hear him. He had to be only 20 yards. So I did the only thing I could think of at the time, which was I pulled my grunter out, and I grunted back. I just, and I tried to pretend like I was another deer. And, he waited, and he probably ran, another 10, 15 yards, stopped, and then turned and grunted again. And we did that for about a minute, and then he just bolted. And I just sat there and kicked myself for the rest of the day, thinking I should have known that I should not have walked into this really thick stuff.
Sanctuary.
I mean, I don't know what. I mean, and when the light came fully up and I was all by myself because the deer had left, I looked around and there were scrapes, there were rubs. I mean, it's like, duh, it was all right there. So, but I tried to go back and hunt that same spot. I never saw another deer there. I never heard another deer there. I mean, it was blown.
Joe, let me throw something out here, and I mean, it builds on what you said. And this is something that I think about, and I try to have so many hunting spots lined up because there's so much public land that if I visit a tree stand twice in a season, that's a lot because I have so many options, okay? So now, I mean, that it only took one time for the deer to get kind of booted out of there from you walking in there. I mean, sometimes they'll come back, but sometimes they won't. And so you got that now, though. That spot, if you play it right and you wait for the right wind, let's say, and you try to get in there, you might, this season come up, it might work out for you. But keep it as a one-time or, once in a blue moon spot, you know what I mean? But try to find a bunch of other spots that you have 5 spots for an east wind, 5 spots for, you know what I mean? And so my point is, I try to, in the off season, I try to just keep loading on spots, like this spot and this spot and this spot. I mean, there's spots I have right now that I really love, and I don't even get to. There's some spots I haven't hunted in 3 years.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Because I just have so many spots that I have accumulated on the public land. But there was something else I was going to say. What was it?
Well, while you're thinking of that, let me ask you about this. So, one of the big troubles that I find where I hunt here in Texas is food sources. Right. I know they got some acorns, but it's hard to even find the drop-in acorns. And when I do find them, I don't really see any deer there. In a situation where it's super thick, heavy pressure public land, and there's no ag fields around, what would be your advice?
Okay, and this is actually, I think, getting at what I was trying to remember a second ago, but I spend a lot of time walking on the public land in the off season and stuff, and I've gotten to a point where I want a lot of fresh sign, and I'm just talking tracks and scat. I'm not talking rubs and scrapes. I don't even really pay much attention to all the rubs and scrapes anymore at this point in my life. I look for the habitat, which we already talked about, and I look for fresh tracks and scat, because a buck can make a rub one time or not, or if you find a rub, that he doesn't mean he's coming back. But if the deer are regularly going to a spot, which I can tell by all the fresh tracks, then I know I'm onto something. And so what I would say to you is plow through spots and just like, I want to see a lot of fresh tracks. And if I don't see a lot of fresh tracks, I'm going to keep looking. And if you can find those, and again, I haven't hunted where you're hunting, so I don't know, but if you can keep moving keep scouting until you find spots, like that place with the stream, I would walk that whole stream bed and say, where's the dominant crossing? Where is the main spots where the deer are crossing the stream? I usually walk right down the stream bed and look for the real beat spots. Now, stop. Now, where can I set up here? You know what I mean? The deer are going to stop before they walk through that stream. Are they coming this way or that way? All the things we already talked about as far as setting yourself back in a little bit so you can get a quartering away shot. When that deer steps up to the edge of that stream before crossing it, here's where I want to be, type of a thing. But so when you don't know what food they're going to be eating, you have got to look for areas that the deer are just using a lot. And I would say, and again, I'm telling you that you might not even find it because I don't know the deer density, you know what I mean? But that's what I would look for when I don't know what they're going to be feeding on or whatever. And what I have learned in all of my years of hunting is you can find places with real good trails, but if you're not finding fresh tracks on those trails, it's not that big a deal, because I've hunted the same woods for 12 years right here where I live right now, and there are areas that there's got beat trails. I mean, you look at the trail like, wow, this is like a highway. But if you stop and really look at the trail, it doesn't have fresh tracks on it. And that trail's there year after year because, I mean, the deer used it and pounded it in, but it's not something they currently use heavily. So just because it looks like a beat trail doesn't mean you have fresh tracks in the trail. So you're looking for fresh tracks, regardless if it looks like a real good trail or not. And that's where I think a lot of people fall short. And where I used to fall short a lot is I'd find a good looking trail and I'd say, I set up. But what I didn't take time to do is say, yeah, well, are there really fresh tracks on this trail? And I want to see a lot of fresh tracks. And if I don't see them, I'm going to keep looking. And when I started doing that, Joe, I started to see more deer and shoot more deer because the deer, they change their habitats from season to season. And so a beat trail that you're finding could be something they use in the springtime, which is not when you're hunting the deer. Yeah. But it's still a beat-looking trail because they pounded it to death in the spring,
Yeah.
So anyway, that would be something to try to look for when you're out and about. I mean, because it sounds like if it's that thick, they're just feeding on browse and all kinds of stuff. And so you can't really, you did mention something, a real quality statement as far as looking for water. That's a key thing, especially when it's hot. But aside from that, you just want to look for, now deer do have areas they prefer to be. They just, they're creatures of habit. And so if you, like I said, if you can find an area where some of these deer are preferring to be, then now you're getting somewhere, and you're going to be indicating that by the fresh tracks and the fresh scat.
I want to mention that RFVCXR200R. I hope. Oh, is there a way to say that like as a word? Thanks for hanging out with us tonight on the live feed. He says rabbits can feed you as well. Stew time. Let me tell you something about them rabbits. They're almost as hard to hunt as the deer. I've tried to shoot a rabbit or two, and they're squirrely little things. They're fast, and they don't come out and stand broadside very well. The squirrels too. I've taken a couple of pot shots at squirrels, but I don't like losing arrows, and it's super thick where I hunt, so it can be very hard.
You need to carry a couple flu arrows, with the big fletches.
Oh, I got one, and I don't want to lose it either. I was shooting quail. I was shooting at quail this past year, and man, it took me 35 minutes to find that arrow. Those things they're sneaky little things. They hide on you so well, and then you don't know they're there until you're standing right over them. And but that's part of the fun of the chase. But Sean, I just want to thank you for hanging out with us. I got one last question before we let you go for the night. So grateful you've been on sharing your knowledge and your information with us. It really makes a difference to me personally, and I know to our community as well. But in regards to high pressure public land, when you pull up to the parking lot and there's a bunch of cars, trucks, wherever, pulled off everywhere I hunt, where we are, it's really high pressure. A lot of hunters out there. Is there like a golden rule for like how far you want to be away from the next hunter?
Well, it'll depend on the deer a lot. Like, it sounds to me like where you're hunting is a large tract of land. When you're in that situation, it becomes a little more difficult because the deer can just go and go and go. They could be 3 miles back in, if they want to be. When you're in smaller blocks of timber, they still got to find a way so they'll skirt the hunters and stay right in their area. So if a hunter goes in, a deer will skirt around it, get downwind, and kind of hang out. And this is something I was going to actually say earlier. One thing you could try doing, Joe, is using the hunters to do drives for you. So if you see a parking lot full of hunters and they're going back in the woods, set up like 100 yards from the parking area or 100 yards from, look for key, like on the roads, along the roads and near the parking area, look for key deer crossing trails, trails where the deer cross the road, okay? And then get in about 100 yards so you're not, and some states have certain regulations. You have to be so many yards from a road to be able to hunt. So now those hunters that are way back in the woods, when they're coming out, they're going to be pushing deer. And if the deer are wanting to get to the other side of the road or even circle around them, they might have preferred travel corridors to do that. If you can kind of work on that, like work on where are the key deer trails near the road and near the parking area, because they're going to stay, when a deer's running for safety, it's going to stay on the main trail because it's clear, safe, and they know what to expect. It's a lot easier than banging through the thick stuff. And so if you can get positioned in those areas, you could actually use those hunters to drive the deer to you. And I have a buddy who the second buck he ever shot was an 8-point or something like these up here. And he got messed up the spot he was going to hunt at. And at 10:30 in the morning, when most people think, oh, I'm not going to bother going out hunting now, he drove to this other spot, walked in the woods, just randomly. He was a young kid. He was like 16 years old, just learned how, was able to drive on his own. Walks into the woods, a couple hundred yards, climbs up a tree. And then, within 15, 20 minutes, here comes this buck coming right by him, like kind of quick walking. And my friend just had a grunt call. He grunted, and the deer stopped and looked around. He shoots the 8-pointer at like 12 yards.
Wow.
And a couple minutes later, 2 hunters came walking out. And the hunters walked the deer right to him. Okay? And so you can, if you have anybody to hunt with you, you can plan out deer drives. But Joe, in your thought process, as you're studying the public land, think, okay, where are these hunters going to be? Or even just go and watch them walk in. And then don't even go deep in the woods. Say, okay, when these guys are coming out, or even when they're going in, and if the deer try to circle around them, where are the deer going to be and where are they going to travel to based off of that movement? Because there will be plenty of deer who will, if the hunter's walking in, the deer will loop around and get behind the hunter. The hunter is going to keep going, and the deer it might even go back the way the hunters came from. If you set yourself up there, Joe, you might put yourself in the chips. Okay, that's a strategy you could try to implement this hunting season. And one year I did a deer drive with a guy. It was me and him. It was the two of us, and it was a big mountainside. It wasn't like a drive where you set somebody at one end and you walk. We split up through the woods, 150 yards apart, and we just walked real slow. And he actually, at one point I looked over to the opposite side where the guy was. So I looked this way, the guy was on that side, and I saw a big, huge buck going the way that we were coming from.
Wow.
This buck got out in front of us and looped way down around, probably the downwind side of us, and was headed back to where we were coming from. And I just got a glimpse of him. I got lucky. And that's the point, though. Especially your smart big bucks, a lot of times will loop around a hunter and get behind him. So if you're hunting pressured land, try to use those other hunters to your advantage. You know what I mean? And you did ask about how far away should you be. I mean, if you're 100 yards from a hunter, 150 yards, you could be in that bubble where a deer's trying to circle downwind to that person. And if you're, if you can catch the deer, trying to do that, you know what I mean, it could work in your advantage. Out of a respect, for me, I don't want anybody right up on me, even though it happens all the time. But if you're out of eyesight, if you have an idea where that hunter's going to be, if you're 120 yards or whatever, I think that, you've given it a little bit of respect as far as you know what I mean, and you might catch some deer moving. So that's my attempt to answer your question.
Fantastic. All right, praise be to Jesus Christ. Sean, thanks for hanging out with us tonight. Now let's real quick before we let you go. Sean's Outdoor Adventures is your webpage. Sean'sOutdoorAdventures.com. You can find your books there. And now, are you still offering your How to Read Topo Maps? Are you still offering that course?
Yeah, I do have a downloadable video for that. I used to have DVDs, but I switched to digital so that people, because I was only shipping in the country, so now it's people from anywhere can get a hold of it.
Well, I highly recommended it. I got the DVD and I've watched it a bunch of times, and it's really good stuff. So that's cool. So you should check out the link in the description of this video and maybe either get his books or pick up his course on topo map reading, because it's making a difference for me. But also, you have a ton of content on your YouTube channel that goes back years. I mean, I think your first filmed hunt was in the 90s. Is that right?
1995 was my first successful harvest on video.
That's pretty impressive. That's pretty incredible, considering what was the resolution quality back then? 8 millimeter. I mean,
Yeah, it was an 8mm.
It was like a JFK film, you know.
Yeah.
Well, but you've got a lot of great hunts actually on your channel, you know, and it's like journeying right there with you. I remember that one video you put out where you were like hunting hard, and you saw a really big public land deer, which, you know, compared to Kansas is not very big, but when you're hunting hard in the public land, the thick stuff, you know, you see a deer like that, and you're jumping, and you were jumping for joy. But then the heartbreak came, and you couldn't find the deer. And it was just like being there with you. It's like my wife and I were watching. Our heart was breaking for you. And, you know, we couldn't even begin to fathom what you were going through at that point. But, and then, of course, you got a big deer last year, and you got him mounted behind you there.
Yeah, there's a couple mounted deer back there.
Yeah. And so congratulations on all that. Thanks for being with us. I put links to your YouTube channel. I'll throw a link to your website. I know I put it into the chat box, but I'll put a link to your website in the description of the video for the on-demand crowd too. So, Sean McVeigh from Sean's Outdoor Adventures, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight.
Yeah. Yep. Sure thing, Joe.
All right, dear, God bless you too. Dear viewer, what do you think? You know, what are your best tips on public land hunting, high pressure bow hunting on public land, or scouting? What do you think? Put it in the description below, or you know, maybe tell us, where are you hunting? I mean, are you one of these guys or gals that shoots you know, on private land and, you know, corn fed? I mean, God bless you. I'm jealous. I want to be you someday. But the rest of us hunting public land, it's not easy, is it? So share your experience in the comments below. We grow together. We become better together when we share what works, what doesn't work with each other. I always learn a ton from you, and I'm super glad you're a part of this community. Do me a favor and give this video a thumbs up. I know it's a really long one, but, you know, Sean shared so much incredible information that I know that this video is going to help a lot of hunters. Maybe they're guys like me who started really late in life, and they've got a big, you know, curve to make up from all the shooters that have been out there for decades. So this video can give them some vital information to help them become better hunters and make more ethical shots and get into position to make those shots. So sharing is always caring, and I'm praying for you that you shoot straight. I hope you pray for me that I shoot straight. And until the next video, may God richly bless you. So let me just tell you something. I've got great news, right? So you already know that I've been trying to get Jeff Kavanaugh's interview going. You know, just a little bit of trickiness there. His part of Canada does not have the best internet reception. So what we did was he filmed his part of the interview, I filmed mine, and I'm just trying to get that footage back. And I tried to do something. I tried to send him a chip. It didn't work, and Canada mailed it back. So Jeff has been super awesome. He's just been a trooper, rolling with the punches here, and Jeff's going to be getting me his end of the footage soon. So that is still coming, I promise. But I've also reached out to Jim Grizzly Kent out in the United Kingdom, who, by the way, is now shooting to he's in the 3D World Championship tournament. He's representing the United Kingdom. How awesome is that? You know who he is. He's fantastic. So he's going to be doing an interview in the next week or so, and we'll have that on the channel as well. I'm super pumped. So all of that is coming up right here on Catholic Hacks Traditional Archery YouTube channel. I'm glad you're here. God bless you. Keep shooting. We'll see you next week.